G'day guys, welcome to our power station comparison between the Ferrex 600 watt Pro from Aldi and the Allpowers R600. Now you might have already seen our initial look at the Ferrex power station, but this time we're here to have a look at the differences between these two fairly similarly priced units. The specifications favour the Ferrex unit in terms of battery size, but they definitely favour the Allpowers in terms of features. Starting with the price, the Ferrex cost us $399 and the R600 $334, a difference of about 15%. The most recent prices we've seen on these units are $349 for the Ferrex and $296 for the R600, but we have to stick to the prices we paid for the purposes of this review. The issue with Aldi products is that they're only available at certain times, and they tend to change their models fairly frequently, so you don't have the certainty of being able to buy a product when you want it. The Ferrex has 128 watt-hours more battery capacity than the R600, and while both have the same 230 volt output at 600 watts, this is an overall difference of about 31%. On the surface, that looks as though the Ferrex is the better buy, but that is before we start to look at the features of each unit. The Ferrex is a much more basic unit in some ways. There's only one 230 volt outlet, while the R600 has two. Power to those outlets is provided by a sine wave inverter in both units. The R600 states that it will provide a surge power of 1200 watts, but only for a few seconds. In reality, it doesn't make much difference, because both units are capable of producing 600 watts of power, and you can easily plug a power board into the Ferrex if you need more outlets. The Ferrex is slightly heavier at 5.95 kilos, while the R600 is 5.65. Now that's expected, as the Ferrex has the larger capacity battery. The next difference is the provision of a 12 volt cigarette lighter style plug in the R600. This is very useful, as there's still plenty of 12 volt appliances with this kind of connection. The Ferrex doesn't have one of these at all, and you have to make up your own in order to use a 12 volt plug like that. Instead, the Ferrex has two 2.1mm outlets, providing 5 amps at 12 volts. 2.1mm plugs are less common, but are still easily available. There's a direct 230 volt cable for charging that comes with the R600. So this means that the power conversion from 230 volts occurs inside the unit, while the Ferrex has an external power converter running to the 2.1mm socket. There's a power overload manual circuit breaker on the R600, while the Aldi handles this internally and shuts down automatically if there's an overload. For solar charging, the R600 has a dedicated plug, and a cable is supplied to connect to a solar panel. The connector style for the solar end is 4mm waterproof PV style. These are becoming much more common these days. The R600 also has a nice little carry bag that's included for the cables. There's no solar cable provided for the Ferrex, and so far we haven't succeeded in finding any way of charging it with solar, but I suspect it will work if we get a solar panel that's sized correctly and doesn't produce more than 5 amps. The R600 will actually take 8.8 amps from solar, so that's another plus in favour of the R600. You can buy the R600 with a solar panel correctly sized for it. This increases the price a bit, but it's not a bad deal. Other differences include lights on the units. The Ferrex has a nice big LED array on one end. It throws out good light and would be quite useful when camping or even in a power blackout at home. There are also two torch-style lights at the other end of the unit, but these don't seem to be very useful. A 12 volt cigarette lighter socket put in that position instead would have been much better. The R600 only has one torch-style light located on the front panel, and from our point of view, it's fairly useless. Both units have 3 modes for the torch-style lights. Both units also have 2 USB-A connections and 2 USB-Cs. The R600 provides 100 watts via the USB-C sockets, while the Ferrex has 30 watts and 60 watts respectively. The USB-A sockets are the same on both units and are rated at 18 watts. Unlike the Ferrex, the R600 has a Bluetooth app that's used with your phone to control the power station. This could be useful if you want to turn the unit off at night without getting out of bed. One of the biggest differences between the units is the warranty offered. The Ferrex only has 12 months, while the R600 has 5 years. That's a pretty big deal. The life expectancy of units like this is often quoted as being about 10 years, but that definitely remains to be seen. Another feature in favour of the R600 is wireless charging. This is for use with compatible phones that can just be placed on top of the unit. A fold-down handle on the R600 is also useful as it makes it easier to store. We did some testing to find out how these units would react to appliances that have a pretty high current draw. We tried a rice cooker on both units. The rice cooker is rated at 400 watts, so it can easily be run by either unit. But there was quite a considerable difference in the capacity of the batteries. So as you can see, it's cooking the rice perfectly well. It's managing that without any problems whatsoever. And one thing that's surprising me is the fan in this is not making anywhere near the amount of noise it was when we were in the coaster. Let's put that in close so you can hear it on the microphone. In fact, the rice pot bubbling away in the background there is louder than the fan is. So I don't know why that is, why it was making so much noise. Don't know why it was making so much noise when we were in the coaster, but it's certainly not doing that now. It's very quiet. So that will be something we have to monitor ongoing, because I don't have an explanation for why that's changed. Okay, so the rice pot has just turned itself off. It's finished cooking, and as you can see there, we're down to 47%. So it's used up almost half the capacity in the battery. It came down from 95 to 47. It's still pulling a little bit of power because it's on warm. I'll turn that off. And that is an interesting test. It's quite capable of running a rice cooker, or at least a low wattage rice cooker. We've got a couple of others that are much too high, but this one at 400 watts is perfectly suitable for use with a smaller inverter like this. Compared to the Ferrex, that is dropping very fast. Okay, so I brought that one down to 10%, didn't quite finish it. So the smaller battery size definitely makes a difference. So I'm going to finish cooking that on the Ferrex. As part of this video, what I want to do is test a number of different 12-volt appliances and other bits and pieces that will plug into these power stations, and see what exactly the draw is from each of them, and get some idea of how useful the power station would be in running them. First thing I'm going to try, and it's just on the other side of the coaster there, is a 12-volt electric blanket. And we can see from that we are drawing 57 watts. And it's saying it will run that for 4 hours. Now, the only way I can test this one with the Audi, because it doesn't have a proper cigarette lighter adapter, is to use my homemade one, which I've got here. As you can see, we've put a little 2.1mm plug on the end of this cigarette lighter adapter. So we plug that in, turn it on, and as you can see we've got the indicator there that says that's turned on, and then we plug this in. We've got the power to it, and it should show a pretty similar draw. We'll just leave it on for a minute or so like we did with the other one. This one's showing 56 watts, the other one went 56, 57, so very similar. But unfortunately with the Audi you have to make yourself up a little plug to be able to do this, which is really quite disappointing, I'd say. It really wouldn't have cost them much to put in one of these 12-volt cigarette lighter adapters, and they are very, very useful. Now, one interesting question would be, how long could one of these small units actually run a fridge? I'm suspecting the answer to that is not very long, maybe 2 to 3 hours. And as you can see, we've got the little angle running here, and we've got that on freezer. It's already down to temperature, and we're just going to pull the socket out of here, pop that into the Allpowers, turn the unit on, and then we have to turn this on, and there we go, the fridge is drawing power. So we are drawing currently up and down. Okay, we're settling down a little bit maybe. No, not really settling down that much. You would imagine that a fridge would be fairly constant draw, but that's jumping all over the place, which is interesting to see. 26 through to 50 something. Will it settle? Doesn't look like it wants to, but judging by the figure at the bottom there that's also jumping up and down, is the run time anywhere between about 5 and 7 hours. So let's split the difference and say it would probably run it for up to 10 hours, because bearing in mind the compressor in this is going to cut in and out about 50% of the time based on our experience with it. So you would double the amount of runtime that the power station says it's likely to do when it's drawing power, because at least for part of that time there won't be any power draw while it gets down and temperature settles before the compressor turns back on again. So you wouldn't want to run a fridge off these for any great length of time, but in an emergency, if all your other power had gone and you had one of these sitting full and you only had a few hours before you could get back onto proper power, it would be a good stopgap perhaps. Okay, here we've got a little portable light, and just running that off the USB to recharge it, and as you can see there, that's just drawing 2 watts, so fairly low draw for recharging things. So we've got a little Uniden unit here with a solar panel on it. We'll pop that in. As you can see, it's now started recharging, and that is pulling 4 watts. So just a little example of what some of the low draw things are going to pull if you want to use these units. And as you can see down the bottom here, it has an estimated run time at the bottom, that's this bottom line here, based on the current draw. So we'll plug the laptop back in. And you can see you have a little light here to indicate that that's on. It does have nice little dust covers. The Ferrex doesn't have dust covers for the sockets. It probably won't make a lot of difference, but yeah, no, it's just a nice little feature to have. And you can see down here it has, based on the current draw, estimated time remaining. It's not entirely accurate, I would say, but it's switching between 4 and 5 hours. But it does give you a vague indication of how long the unit thinks it's going to last with the current power draw. So here we have an item that neither of these should be able to run. This is a little paratha heater or paratha cooker. We'll whack that up to maximum. This says it runs at 900 watts. So neither of these should be able to deal with that. Okay, you can see that cuts out immediately. You get an error symbol there. So it's basically said that is too much of a draw for me. I'm not going to do it. And it cuts it out. Okay, and we even get an alarm on that one, which is useful. So it's giving you an error code, and it gives you an alarm sound, which is also a better feature than the Aldi, which just cuts out without any kind of sound at all. It just gives it an overall good quality feel to the product. The fact that that little screen cuts out, just to save that little bit of extra power. Yeah, somebody has spent a bit of time designing this properly. When it comes to recharging the unit, the Ferrex only has one setting and provides just 61 watts. The R600 has 3 modes listed as mute, standard and fast. Why mute? I have no idea, but it's the slowest of the recharge methods. But it still provides far more wattage than the Ferrex. On fast mode, the R600 takes 417 watts. That compared to 61 watts is a phenomenal difference. This means that the Allpowers unit will charge within about an hour, while the Ferrex will take many hours. One thing in favour of that for the Ferrex is that the slower the charge rate, generally the longer the battery life. Without having used either unit for any length of time yet, it's impossible to categorically state that either are reliable in the long term. But just looking at the features offered by each unit, the R600 wins hands down in our opinion. The only things the Ferrex has going for it are the larger battery capacity and the LED light. Everything else comes down in favour of the R600. The fact that the R600 is much more easily available makes this an absolute winner if you're looking for a smaller style power station. It'll run any appliance that's 600 watts or less, but of course the closer to 600 watts you get, the quicker the battery will get chewed up.